band of brothers and native to the soil, fighting for our liberty with treasure, blood, and toil. And when our rights are threatened, the cry rose near and far, hurrah for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star.
The opinions, views, and conclusions expressed in this show are those of the show host and co-host and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of KPFV FM or its affiliates.
Well, welcome back to KRJ Talk Radio. Keep the Republic just. I'm your host, Gerry Bergman, and I have a sit-in co-host today, Gerry Buttler. And we're going to talk about the Second Amendment, since I understand there's a rally coming up Saturday. So, I got secondhand notice I might be wrong, but so we're going to use that for the subject tonight. And I want to get a shout out to Communications Inc. at 50 Emory Street, right next to Red Sky Barbecue. It's a white building with blue trim behind, Best Hardware. And you can stop in there and get all your office supplies, a private mailbox, UPS, Federal Express, or U.S. Postal Service mailings. And if you're like us, understand what's going on in this country, you want to fly the proper flag, Miss Mary has a couple flags in there, and she also got some of the flyers that we make and we put out there on her counter. So if you want to know more, you can go in there. Or if you don't want to mail, you can drop off a letter to us there, and she'll put it in our mailbox, and we'll get back to you. Our box is 500 at 50 Emory Street, Nevada Republic. So I want to say we had a beautiful day today so far. I understand it's cloudy now. I didn't look up when I came in. But we had a clear sky, no chemtrails, not like yesterday, the day before, over the weekend, days before. We've been fighting chemtrails. I don't understand how those balloon companies can go up in the air and take people up into those chemicals. I just don't understand it. Those should be days you stay down, or at least have some good respirators. Take that stuff off, but then you're getting on your skin and everything. So start looking up in the sky. Start seeing what's up there. You worry about the Second Amendment, but you ain't worried about the chemtrail spraying around the world and all the 100-plus chemicals that are being sprayed. You don't know nothing about it, and you just don't care for some reason. So, this reminder, the Second Amendment is one of 10 amendments. They're all very important. And in this county, we keep trying to emphasize the fact we don't have a Fifth Amendment grand jury. We keep getting told that there's $25,000 set aside by the corporate county commissioners, which are actually board of directors for the County and Nye Corporation. They really don't work for you unless you have a contract with them. So keep that in mind. You need a grand jury. You can't be indicted, go to court without a grand jury indictment. You got to go in front of a grand jury. And remember, you have the right to a trial by jury. So look it up. Know your Bill of Rights. Know the bankruptcy, 1933. Know House Joint Resolution 192. Know the Act of 1871. Read about March 1861, the last lawful legislative Congress. History is very important. I was watching the George Washington miniseries, and there are a lot of untruths here. So, once you get to know the truth, everything's different. So, anything you want to say on this before we get going here?
Oh, absolutely. I've always
by the way,
opportunity to open.
I bring Gerry here because he talks about the Nevada Revised Statutes, and I talk about the Constitution and common law. So we got to group together here. Go ahead, Gerry.
Well, today, Gerry brought up a lot of good points about the Constitution, and it is very, very important to actually read the articles of the Constitution because it gives you the framework for how laws are actually supposed to be written. So you're talking about I think it's the third article where it talks about how the Supreme Court has the supreme decision to enforce whether a law is constitutional or not. And then there is a supremacy clause. The supremacy clause states that the that the federal government, it's supposed to be the Constitution always comes first, then the federal government, then then state. State cannot supersede federal government. Federal government cannot supersede Constitution. Then reading the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment is actually very important because it was very vague. So if you go back to the Supreme Court, the article that talks about how the Supreme Court ruling actually talks about how laws can be constitutional, whether they can or cannot be enforced. You have to jump ahead and look at the 10th Amendment, where it states that it actually went to Supreme Court ruling what the states are delegated to do within their power. The federal government is actually extremely restricted to what they can and cannot do. They are restricted to the Constitution. One of the powers that they have is to declare war, international and national economy. They have the right to print money. There's just a few more things other than that. Well, the state's actually extremely limited under the 10th Amendment because the 10th Amendment actually talks about the power goes to the people, respectively to the states.
Let me read it real quick because there's only one sentence. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people.
You could read the Article 5, which would be...
Well, I'm sorry. Article 5?
Yeah,
I thought you said Article 3.
It's the Article 5 is Supremacy Clause. Article 3 actually states that the Supreme Court ruling has final say over any law. Because a state can't supersede federal.
Okay, Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatives of 2/3, which we don't have no more, of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which is in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatives of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions and 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article, and no state without his consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate.
I believe it's the Supremacy Clause. It might not be Article 5, but it's called the Supremacy Clause. It might be 6.
So that wasn't the one you wanted me to read.
Well, the third one is, the third, I believe it's the third article talks about the Supreme Court rulings.
Judicial Department.
Yeah, it says that the Supreme Court has final say, and anything that goes past it would be it's not constitutional.
The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges both of the Supreme and inferior court shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuation in office.
Okay, so going back to the 10th Amendment, the states are only delegated certain things. And how it's worded is actually very specific. It goes first that the states only actually have the power to local economy and granting permits and licensing. The second is education, welfare. Then it goes to this is where it's very important. It doesn't say that it has a right to taxes, but to find funding for said privileges. The last is public safety. The state has a right to public safety, but if you read the 10th Amendment as we just did, it actually grants it to the people, respectively to the state. So under the Second Amendment, and I want to talk, because that's actually just the U.S. codes. But if you look up in the state constitution, I think it's Article 11, 10 or 11, it says every citizen of the state of Nevada shall be able to keep and bear arms. Every citizen of the state of Nevada shall be able to keep and bear arms for legal purposes. And then it gives the examples. So killing somebody is not a legal purpose. Self-defense is one of the examples that they gave. Hunting is another example that they gave. So a lot of the times that, like, because what I've been reading the NRSs are actually quite fair, but they're not being used properly. And so as being part of the political system, me running for offices, that I actually found out why we do the oath of affirmation. The oath of affirmation is, I do so solemnly swear to support, defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of Nevada. At the end of it, I do so solemnly swear under penalties of perjury. The reason why is because when they actually break the Constitution, even their own Constitution, because I have never met anybody who's actually read the state Constitution, they're actually liable for impeachment. That's why a crime, perjury is a crime that is impeachable. That's why it's put into the state oath of affirmation. So the Second Amendment is not just the Second Amendment in our state. It's ratified within it's ratified within the state. Excuse me, I'm having a little bit of trouble thinking. It's ratified by the state. Under every citizen shall have the right to keep and bear arms for legal purposes under civil power supreme, it's called.
Now, let's keep in mind this is a corporate state, so it applies only to 14th Amendment U.S. citizens, corporate citizens.
I didn't read into that yet.
So it doesn't have nothing to do with American state nationals that were born in constitutional states.
Well, under the Supremacy Clause, actually Supremacy Clause states that the state constitutions are actually treaties. And it has to be honored by the Supremacy Clause. So, and I was reading the new law that just came out about the red what's that called, the red flag laws.
I have been following that.
Oh, the red flag laws are at 100%. They try to hide it by trying to make it legal by sending it through a court system. Basically, if you give off symptoms of like somebody's not safe and they think you own guns, they can go to the courts and have the courts file a warrant to take your weapons away.
Yeah, these are corporate courts, military tribunals, and they're not lawful.
So the case is that that's called an illegal seizure. Also, an illegal seizure is when you're getting pulled over and your registration is up and they threaten to tow your vehicle away. That is also an illegal seizure because no official can grant you guilty until you're found guilty in a court of law. And the only time they can actually take your vehicle or take any of your possessions if it's considered evidence and it has to be part of the crime, which in that case, it's not evidence. That's called an illegal seizure. So through the courts, you have to be found guilty of a crime before they can seize your weapons. So my question is that what if somebody red flags you? They go through the courts, everything gets signed off, and they go in your house, they kick your door in, they try to take your weapons, but they're not there. What happens then?
Well, you go back to the Clearfield Trust Company versus U.S. Unless you have a contract with that corporate entity, they have no jurisdiction.
Unfortunately, you'd have to sue them civilly, too.
Well, yeah. Or you call the provost marshal to come over and intervene.
Yeah, but you're getting better off just civilly suing them. It works out. It's been working out for a lot of people.
So, yeah, there's different ways to do it.
So, the Second Amendment is not just the right to bear arms, though. That's actually the prefatory clause, or it's the mandatory clause. They have a prefatory clause, which is the right to assemble and form a militia.
Yeah, that breaks down to the First Amendment.
Yes.
The right to associate and disassociate.
Well, it's for the security of the state. So when you're talking about limiting firearms and you're talking about saying you can't have this, you can't have that, the politicians are literally saying that they're taking away your ability to form a militia to protect your state. So the prefatory clause, which is the right to form a militia, is a social right. That's the right that everybody has, and it's a right that everybody should help maintain. The second is the mandatory clause, which is called the right to keep and bear arms. The right to keep and bear arms is an individual right. It's to the individual to keep that right up. And if you read the Constitution, if you read the state constitution, if you read the federal constitution, if you read an international constitution, There is nowhere in there that, one, says the law has to be enforced, two, that you have the right to be protected by somebody else. It only states that you have the right to protect yourself and your rights. As I've been reading about the laws, in certain cases, especially NRS and federal law, that laws don't necessarily have to be enforced.
Now, are you referring to codes and statutes and regulations or actual law?
That's, well, code statutes are the law. They're actually guidelines is what they're supposed to be, because when it comes down to it, it actually, when the law is not a law until it's enforced. And it's up to discretion. And the discretion is either education, citation, or arrest. And for arrest, it actually comes down to many different levels of arrest. Why can I make that arrest? Honestly, by federal statutes, there's only 4 ways that they can make an arrest. By state, it's 7. They have 7 things that they can do to arrest you. The first one is whether they've actually they have to have seen you commit the crime. They have to after they've seen it, they have to believe you will hurt yourself, harm yourself, or property. They have to believe that you would, after collecting the information, they have to believe that you would actually commit a crime. That's the 4 federal statutes. The state statutes is a little bit different. They actually expanded it because state can't actually overrule federal, so they just added on to it. So in the state of Nevada, under the NRS 171, an arrest can only be made on no arrest for misdemeanors can be made after 7 o'clock at night, or 7 p.m., or before 7 a.m. without a warrant. No arrest can be made on private property without for misdemeanors without a warrant. That's actually in the state statutes under NRS 171. I was looking up the about arrest, citizens arrest versus, and then there's 3 types of arrest. There's a citizen's arrest where the citizen can actually make that arrest, and the citizen actually has more power to make an arrest than law enforcement. It's one of because the sheriff's responsibilities under NRS Chapter 4 is actually to assist in those things. That's to keep the peace. Like I said, there's nowhere in the NRS, there's nowhere in federal codes where it says the law has to be enforced. But in NRS, it says that it's actually the 3rd responsibility. The first responsibility is search and seizure. The second responsibility is enforce court orders. The 3rd responsibility is keep the peace. 4th responsibility is maintaining detention centers. There's a whole chapter of that. So for citizens arrest, you have 2 laws. You have the criminal law and you have the civil law. So if you make in the state of Nevada, for a felony, to make a citizen's arrest, a citizen does not actually have to see the crime. They can just make the crime based off of hearsay. Under the state law, that's what it says. They said that for felony arrest, a citizen can make an arrest without actually seeing the crime. The deputies can't do that. The deputies are actually deputies and state troopers are extremely limited by procedure, because they're under Chapter 4. They actually talk about the what's it called? Procedures, and they have to stick by the procedures or they can be arrested. So what I was looking under citizens arrest, if you don't believe that you can make that arrest, you can call a deputy to make that to assist you in making that arrest. And they're mandatory by misdemeanor. It's a misdemeanor for them to tell you no. But if you make that arrest and that arrest isn't good, you've abused that power, you can be held liable. So where the deputies and the state troopers get it easy is that if they make a mistake, you have to sue the county. You can't sue them personally. So the next arrest is it's warrantless arrest. It's basically where they've seen you commit a crime and they arrest you for it, but it has to be an arrestable offense as well. So you'd have to read the NRS 171 and NRS 200s to actually get to know the actual way that you can perform it. And then there's a warranted arrest, which is basically a warrant signed by a judge. So going back to it, if you read NRS 171, you can actually defend your own rights to keep and bear arms. You just have to know the laws, and that's one of the things that I have the hardest thing doing here is because everybody is so idiotic. Everybody claims to know the law, but they never read it. They can't quote it. They know what the schools taught them, and they know what they've been told. But as I read the laws, that the laws are actually it's a sharp knife. It works both ways. But the problem is that everybody's been using it, like the government has been using it in ways that only benefit them.
So see, you're talking like you're legitimizing that de facto foreign corporation in the District of Columbia, or this corporate franchise for the state of Nevada.
No, what I'm saying is
they're not a constitutional government, so regardless what they put out, it's not a law.
Well, it's a law is and
their laws their guidelines only apply to, once again, 14th Amendment citizens.
It's not supposed to be. Like I said, it's a treaty.
Yeah, well, you got to have a place where it applies. It doesn't apply to everybody. You got to understand it about how the corporation works.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, the NRSs are actually they're pro civilians. It doesn't really. The NRSs don't really help the government as much. The problem is that it's like fighting a retard. They can't defend themselves. All you can do is just keep hitting them and laughing, and they can't do anything for themselves because they don't know any better, and they won't learn for themselves. I actually tell them the NRS. I used to say, hey, look it up. It's in this section. Look it up, because I found when I was reading something and I kept reading, I was finding more things as I was reading. So I wanted people to look through the whole section and read through it. But nobody would do that. They would just keep telling me that I'm full of crap. When I was telling them about the Constitution, they kept telling me that I was full of crap. And I'm sitting there, I'm holding the Constitution, I'm reading it to them, and they told me that I'm too young, inexperienced, that I don't know crap.
Well, here, even in the U.S. Corporate Codes and 28, Section 302, it says the United States is a federal corporation. Now, there's nowhere in the Constitution that allow for a federal corporation. And then on 14, it says state means any of the several states, the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, where do you say that? Marianas, or any territory or possession of the United States. So under their corporate rules, everything's a state, lawful or not.
Yeah, but you have to go back to the Supremacy Clause.
Well, I don't care about everything. We haven't had a lawful government since March of 1861.
Yeah, what I'm telling you is you have to go back to the Supremacy Clause, because they're enforcing laws that they can't enforce under the Supremacy Clause.
Yeah, I understand it, but they have no lawful right to even be in. The District of Columbia is a foreign enclave. Supreme Court verified that.
This is what I've been noticing. I mean, everybody's arguing about Trump. They're talking about all this other stuff.
You ain't going to get me to argue about Trump. He's the CEO and president of a foreign corporation.
So they're arguing about federal government, but the issues are on the local level. Like, I don't have FBI agents coming knocking on my door giving me crap about my dogs, or my neighbor's pissed off, so he calls. I don't have all that. I worry about getting pulled over. Because I can, obviously I can see that the laws for traffic is very strict, which is crazy, because at Philippines, Thailand, they don't enforce traffic laws at all, and you never see an accident there. Here we've got 5 accidents a day at least, and we enforce it extremely heavily. We've actually got a lot of crime that's going on, and then we've got more people filling the courts with traffic violations than we do with actual criminals.
Yeah, and once you assume your state nationals right, these corporate security forces can't give you a ticket, especially for traveling without a license. I just had a friend in Virginia won 3 cases.
Okay, so that one is I know that one.
Licensing was set up for commercial purposes only.
Yeah, well,
private property.
The Supreme Court ruling for that one, because I actually wrote a letter to both, to everybody, to the Sheriff's Department, to the District Attorney's Office, and the County Commission about that. So the Supreme Court ruling on that, I don't know the name off the top of my head, but it was that it's not mandatory for people to have a driver's license under the right to free travel shall be protected by both law and free travel and free movement by law and safe conduct. However, that the Supreme Court did delegate powers to the local law enforcement to enforce if they wanted to or not, a driver's license.
Yeah, well, it's set up to generate revenue. That's all for the corporations.
Because for a while I've been trying to get in everywhere to become a deputy, I've called in down to New Orleans. I called everywhere.
That guy ever get back to you in Missouri?
No, he did not. So I actually spoke to them about that, and it's called revenue by fines.
Yeah, that's what the motorcycle cop.
Yeah, and there's a Supreme Court ruling on that as well, is that there can't be revenue by fines, and that's another issue that we're having next to the Second Amendment, is that no excessive bails or fines.
Yep.
So basically, what the Supreme Court ruling said is that if it's more than what the person can afford, and it would cause, and it's cruel and unusual, then it is excessive.
Well, the International Bill of Rights says the same thing about excessive fines and bills.
Yeah.
And who wrote the International Bill of Rights? American Bar Association. And we're signatory to it.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, that's the thing is that there's people that they'll read certain things and then they'll stick to it, but they won't change. And the most important thing is Supreme Court rulings, because Supreme Court rulings tell them whether or not they can enforce the law.
That's just like I got here. I was made aware of the Treaty of Peace 2020. It's an arbitration action against the de facto United States corporation to prove it had lawful authority to be where it's at, and they never responded. So now it's gone into the collections part of it, and it's gone into the international.
So there is a lot of because the Second Amendment is extremely important to me.
Well, it's important, but you got to understand who it applies to. Like anybody's a U.S. citizen, corporate citizen, in the 14th Amendment, it's a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
When you take that U.S. corporate citizen, you don't have rights, you have privileges, and they can take those anytime. If you're American state national, you have rights, God-given rights, guaranteed you by the Creator and common law.
Well, my birth certificate says that I'm a nationalized citizen, so.
Yeah, but he was born on a military base, a corporate entity.
So, but with the Second Amendment, like as I was talking about with Supreme Court rulings, so so there was a Supreme Court ruling. The most recent one is Heller versus the District of Columbia.
And there's a bunch of cases in the back of that.
Yeah, and then also the next one that's relevant to it is Supreme. What was it? It was McDonald versus.
I forgot which one it was.
14th District of Columbia Supreme Court ruling. I think it's McDonald versus Baltimore. I think it was. So basically, what it was. I mean, this is important.
Wasn't it Chicago?
Maybe Chicago. So basically, what the Heller versus DC was, and you gotta kind of have to look at it abstract because they gave you good information in it. So basically, in DC, they were saying that you could own a firearm, but you had to keep it in your house, and it had to be in different pieces, and it had to be locked away. So a cop, I guess his name was Heller, decided to fight that.
Well, he was a correctional officer.
No, I'm not sure. I can't.
Yeah, so they felt he didn't need to have a gun off the prison.
Yeah, so when he took it to the Supreme Court actually, which made it, for me, it was very impressive because even Ruth Bader Ginsburg was talking about it, and they didn't have a right to tell people how to store their weapons. Basically, what it came down to was when the Second Amendment was written, it was written and meant for on your person, pocket, or clothing. Both Ruth Bader Ginsburg agreed to that, and both Justice Scalia agreed to that. And see, the thing with Supreme Court rulings is they just can't rule based off of what they feel. They have to do a lot of they have to read a lot of historical documents of the time because they have to base it on when it was written.
Yeah, the one I downloaded is off Wikipedia, and it's got some good reference material in the back for this, other cases. And I would say that's a good one to download, unless you want to go right to the Supreme Court website and download it. But this one, Wikipedia gave a lot of reference information on here. So
I mean, the government is actually very smart about how they've been doing things. They found out, and then ways on how to attack people and their gun rights. So one of the ways that they did attack people is they wrote mental ill clauses in laws against people who are mentally ill. So Supreme Court ruling actually ruled against people who are mentally ill, banning them from owning firearms.
McDonald versus City of Chicago.
Well, this one's called Troy.
That's what I'm saying. That's the one I was talking about.
This one's called Troy 1. So where basically they're saying if you have or ever had a mental illness, you can't own a firearm. So Troy brought it back to, and then this is called Troy 2, where they reversed their decision. Because what happened is that when we're talking about weaponizing laws and everything like that, they want to take everything away from you. They want any reason why, and normal people aren't very smart to it. But you have to look at people's personal rights. So then when you're looking at federal statutes, they said that people who have mental illnesses can heal. They have done nothing. If they have done nothing wrong, they have not committed any crimes, they can heal from their crimes. So federal statutes for actually owning a firearm is basically anybody who is actually receiving medication or care for having a mental illness, they can't have it while they're in care of or being supervised for a mental illness. That's what the federal law actually dictates. But like I said, people can heal from mental illnesses, and they shouldn't have to lose their rights, especially if they've done nothing wrong.
Well, here was a case on January 10, 2014 in Morris versus the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The district court struck down a Corps of Engineers regulation barring possession of loaded guns in recreation areas surrounding the Corps' dams. The court held that tents are akin to the homes, and under Heller versus Second Amendment rights are protected. So keep that in mind. If you're on a BLM or any other government agency citing you with an RV or your tent, Supreme Court ruled that's a home, and you have the right to have your weapons with you.
Again, in Heller versus D.C., Justice Scalia and both Ruth Bader Ginsburg agreed that having a firearm was not actually to be in your home, but it was to be considered on your person, pocket, or clothing.
And then there was a case regarding the San Francisco Housing Authority. They lost because the Housing Authority didn't want guns in their apartments. Well, they were ruled against. They lost that one. That was in 2009.
Again, because the weapon is supposed to be on your person, pocket, or clothing. So I have to look a little bit more into it, whether or not having to have a concealed weapons permit is constitutional or not. And that's something that people should be looking into and thinking about. They should also be looking into federal law and state law. I mean, I think the state of Nevada, they're actually very restrictive on gun rights, more than which is unconstitutional as far as concealed carry goes. They're overstepping their boundaries for public safety.
Ezel versus Chicago, July 6, 2011. Had to do with shooting ranges. The city trying to ban them within the city limits, trying to keep the shooting ranges outside. Well, the Seventh Circuit reversed the district court decision that violated Second Amendment rights on the grounds they could not be exercised elsewhere any more than it could infringe the right to freedom of speech on the grounds that citizens could speak elsewhere. So they couldn't restrict where you put up a shooting range.
Well, what's kind of weird too is, like, especially with the anti-gun people, is that they don't understand. They keep making more restrictive laws against guns, but anything you do with a gun is already legal. It's illegal to kill somebody. It's illegal to maim them in any state. You can't maim somebody. You can't kill anybody. Right now, I mean, I believe that the number one killer in the United States is actually poisons. The second thing that kills most people is knives and blunt objects. The third one is DWIs. Guns are actually seventh on the list.
That's just like the simple flu. Common flu killed 14,000 people last year. But we got this coronavirus going around, which hasn't really killed that many people yet when you figure the global population. But just in the U.S. alone, 14,000 people died from flu.
Oh, yeah, but you got to remember that there's 318 million people within the United States, so that's less than 1%.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still low, but I mean...
Well, I mean, like, more people get killed in Chicago and in the city of New York every year than in Afghanistan and Iraq.
By the cops?
Huh?
By the cops?
Well, it doesn't matter who they get killed by, they're killed. But more people a year get killed in New York City than in Iraq and Afghanistan alone.
Seems to me it's a bad place to live.
Yeah. Well, that's just one city. Imagine Chicago.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I'd want to go. Too many taxes, one thing. So anyway, this is KRJ Talk Radio on Trump Freedom Radio, 98.1 FM on your dial. And we're talking about the Second Amendment, which is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free, sovereign state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed in any way, as the Supreme Court just got done basically saying. No truly loyal American opposes the common law principles requiring the people to keep and bear arms in peace and in defense of themselves, their families, their neighbors, and their country. Indeed, nothing can ruin the country, says Daniel Webster, if the people themselves will undertake its safety, just like what was that town in Georgia that made everybody have a gun. And the crime rate just went away. For safety, and nothing can save it if they leave that safety in the hands but their own. Do not figure call 911 is going to save you. American constitutional state nationals, U.S. citizens. Americans are constitutional state nationals. U.S. citizens are 14th Amendment corporate citizens. That's like we have two passports. And you should learn about that. The phrase well-regulated militia denotes the always well-armed and ready-to-fight people. In a word, a well-regulated militia is those able-bodied men that keep at least one loaded firearm in their homes and carry it outside their homes, open carry. The phrase free state refers to the separate republic states of the Union, confirming each republic state's concurrent jurisdiction within the federal government over its militia. Oh, and if you want to know about the dual passports, you can look at that up on the UN website because it tells the United States it has two passports. The militia, being the people, is well regulated when it keeps in readiness, that is, each human keeping and bearing his own firearm and disciplining themselves to its effective use. I got to think about nowadays, it can be a woman. It can be no longer his, or I'm going to get that man part out of there. The word militia in its general sense, which when standing alone refers to the non-military yet able-bodied population, every person able to fight that has common law always used the term. Evidence of the meaning of Amendment 2 is overwhelming. The common law tradition's well-regulated militia reaches back to the days before King Alfred. 849 to 899, he ruled A.D., when common law required every able-bodied man to carry his weapon. Even while farming, part of the work crew stayed armed, ready to engage brigands. Must be Scotland. After the swearing in of William I, each shop owner and landholder in England was duty-bound to keep a long bow and at least 40 arrows. Weapons a weapon. Well, he had to be armed. The common laws of England, here in this state, which are NRS 1.030, always require the people to be armed, and not only armed, but to be expert in arms. The answer to this outrage committed by the de facto corporate state of Nevada is to be a member by contract to a Nevada Republic Common Law Private Members Association. A contract signed in the proper color of ink and your thumbprint sealed by the acceptance of a .999 silver coin makes that contract lawful. When you do a contract with Federal Reserve notes, it's not in a lawful form. The significance of the colonial militia, says the Supreme Court, was that it was composed of civilians, primarily soldiers on occasion. It was upon such men that the Republic states relied for defense and securing of the laws. The securing of your free Republic state was Amendment 2. Depends upon such an armed militia among us. Any government infringement, background checks, permits, regulations that may prevent, impede, hamper, or even chill this personal right to keep and bear arms makes our country vulnerable the thugs, whether in or out of government. The colonial militia comprised all males physically capable of acting in concert for the common defense. Today, the militias are made up of all capable people who, when called for service, were expected to appear bearing arms supplied by themselves and of the kind in common use at the time. Indeed, for a man or woman to be ready to fight at a moment's notice means they must keep their firearms and ammunition handy in their home. Because, see, we don't have a military for the the proper name is Confederation of American States. We don't have a military. There is a military, but it's a foreign military belonging to the District of Columbia, controlled by the military corporate entity formed to the Crown. It belongs to the Crown out of Edinburgh, Scotland. Bush works for the Crown. That corporation is headquartered in Edinburgh, Scotland. You ever kind of make the connection why he has a golfing resort or club there in Scotland? Oh, maybe the two.
I'm kind of an agoraphobe. I don't have cable and I just stay home. So,
so it says here. So they must keep their firearm and ammunition handy in their home. When they leave their home, they must carry that gun loaded. The Second Amendment, well-regulated militia are those individuals of the people carrying loaded guns as weapons. The Second Amendment is not about hunting, but protects every individual's personal right or privileges as status dictates. To keep and carry guns to protect self, family, neighborhood, and country. It also protects this right against state and federal violations. And man, we got those. 14 states now, their militias, their constitutional militias, wear the patch of the U.S. civil flag of the constitutional common law Articles of Confederation. The founders wrote exhaustively on this subject, leaving no room for debate, that they wanted us to be smartly armed, ready to stop any oppressor of our God-given rights. Government infringement, including foreign de facto corporate government, upon our God-given right to keep and carry firearms limits only the law-abiding. The thugs are always going to have their guns.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing, like using basic logic.
Yeah.
So if I say that you're only allowed to have one-shot rifle in your house, and then for some strange reason we get invaded by some foreign, then everybody has Uzis, that one shot is not going to help you defend your home against those invaders.
Nope.
You know? When they limit the right to keep and bear arms, they're limiting the right to be able to defend yourself. And it was ideally supposed to be against the tyrannical government. That's what George Washington actually stated.
And that's what we have now.
Like I said before, though, logically, there's nothing you can do with a firearm that isn't already illegal. You know? And I don't understand it. So why would you take away someone's right to bear arms, especially when they haven't committed any crimes? You know, why limit them to being able to defend themselves if they have not committed any crimes?
Well, why do we keep going to wars for no reason except to make money?
That's beyond me. I mean, I just know about
it's kind of like it doesn't make sense.
Like I tell people like all the time, because they keep trying to talk to me about religion and they keep trying to talk to me about federal government stuff. And I said, hey, if it's not coming down my street, I don't give it. I don't.
Censorship.
Yeah. So like, if it's not coming down my road heading to my house or my neighbor's house, it's not my business.
Yeah.
So but when it actually does affect my house, that's when I get a little upset. When it affects my means of travel, being able to go to assume my rights of suffrage, that's when I have a problem with it. And everything I do, because I'll be the first one at your door to fight them off. Or I'll be the first one at anybody's door, whether I like them or not. Because if they can go for you, they have the courage enough to go for you, eventually they'll have the courage enough to come for me. And I'd rather fight them on your doorstep than mine.
We'll see.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is I'd rather fight them on your doorstep than mine.
After 160 years, I think it's time we kind of stop this tyranny and restore what we have?
No, well, see, that's part of the issues that we're having because we're not thinking logically. So if we liberals get their way and we do allow illegal immigration, what's to stop China from sending everybody they possibly can to come over here to sway the votes, to get into politics, and then change the laws where China now owns it? Well, what's to stop Mexico from pushing everybody in there, changing our laws, getting in, infiltrating our legal system, and then giving everything to Mexico?
No, but we don't have our legal system. We don't even have a government.
What I'm saying is, though, is that if we have to have borders, we have to have our own culture. Because if we pour in too much water, everybody's going to drown.
Well, you just activate the militia for the meantime until we get back to being a lawful. So,
well, it's that's the issue, though, too. Is like you have the First Amendment. You have the right to believe what you want to believe. You have the right to say what you want to say. You have the right to protest, as long as it doesn't affect anybody else. You have the right to keep and bear arms. You have the right to form a militia, as long as you're not using your rights to infringe upon somebody else's.
That's what common law says.
But a lot of people don't understand that. When somebody's going in there, they go, I don't give a damn what you think, and blah, 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 and then they're like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I don't care what you do and how it affects your family. If there's because I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan, and I was listening to talk to Ben Shapiro, and they were talking about certain things, and the issue that never came up was like, well, you have the right to love who you want to love and to be who you want to be. But how, it's against my religion, and how am I supposed to teach my children my way, doing my things, if they're being influenced by other people, doing certain things? And that never came up. It was just, it's my religion, you can do what you want to do, and it's fine, I'm going to abstain from it. But how the society affects my children, because I have to grow with my children, and children learn more from school and being around other kids than they will from me. The only thing I can do is I can try to guide them into the right way. But we never understand the way, people don't understand, okay, well, I'm going to do things this way, and I don't care how it affects anybody else. And then, there should be some play in there. There should be, if I go down the street screaming, F you, F this, and F that, yeah, that's going to make people upset. And we actually have law, that's what's crazy, too, is how the laws are being enforced, because we have battery laws and we have assaulting laws. We actually have laws against provoking violence, but we're only enforcing half the laws. Because it's actually called provoking violence. It's any gesture, physical or visual or audio that provokes violence. It's a misdemeanor. But I look in there. I know a lot of people talk garbage. I know people make other people upset, but they only enforce the battery part. They don't enforce the provoking violence part.
Okay, on to another subject. The problem we have now is almost like the time of the British in our American cities. Today we have a foreign enclave called the District of Columbia. We have what was once a lawful military and is now a foreign corporate military of the Crown, a president and CEO of a Scottish corporation, executive Congress controlled by the Vatican, no lawful government since March of 1861. We just had the Lieber Code, General Order 100. The world of make-believe today. The de facto foreign corporate government has now trespassed most all of our common law constitutional limits daily. Americans claim these amendments to our common law constitution to protect their God-given rights. Rights unclaimed will not long remain. We must use these rights to stop the de facto foreign corporate government's use of powers never given to them by our Articles of Confederation. The purpose of our Bill of Rights as our common law constitution is not to limit the freedom of the people, but to confine a de jure lawful government power. To confine a de facto lawful government power. Every freedom in our Bill of Rights is an individual right. Our Bill of Rights speaks only of individual and never public rights. The Bill of Rights is the text for trying the acts of the foreign government. Words of Thomas Jefferson. The Fourth Amendment is little more than affirmations affirmance. I can't even get the word out.
I can't read your handwriting.
I can't either. So anyway, more than a confirmation of a great constitutional doctrine of the common law, it requires that government, before searching or seizing things or people, must persuade a judge to sign and issue a proper warrant to search a place described for the persons or things to be seized. Amendment 4 is all but dead unless the jury enforces it. The police state's power to search and seize, steal, and arrest is limitless under martial law. Freedom is lost because now we live under martial law and international law. The private security forces, known as sheriffs and police departments, must now follow Geneva Convention and can be arrested for war crimes. Citizens are non-combatants. We must return to the common law Constitution and the laws of our God. Remember, when it says the security forces, referring to the Clearfield Doctrine Trust, or Clearfield Trust Company versus U.S. Any government corporation that receives Federal Reserve notes, private funding, it becomes a private corporation. Amendment 5 distinguishes the common law tradition with its grand jury from the civil law tradition, which has none. Americans nowadays allow the de facto corporate government to abuse the grand jury. The common law shields a protection to us. The board of directors of the corporate county of Nye has set aside $25,000 for a grand jury. Where is it? Is it because the board of directors, aka county commissioners, do not have to provide this right? There's no contract between the people living in Nye County and the corporation. No jurisdiction as ruled by the U.S. Supreme Court. Our national motto, however, is not in government employees we trust, but instead in God we trust. Our common law Constitution is careful to keep militia members under the common law protection of grand jury indictment until the member has answered Congress's call under the Militia Act. Grand jury indictment remains a right to those militia members having yet to answer any call to muster. Amendments 6 and 7 gives you the right to a trial by jury. Are you informed of this right? But these rights do not apply in the corporate courts. We have military tribunals, guilty until proven innocent. So that's my little comment on Second Amendment. It's all comes back to us thanks to common law, and it says that the common law of England here in this Nevada territory is the law as long as it is not repugnant to the constitutions. Well, the constitutions are based on common law, so how would it be repugnant? So, anything else you want to add there?
Oh, no, I think I've said my piece for today, but I'm always looking for an option to open my mouth,
Well, that's the Second Amendment. I mean, that's the subject for today.
Well, again, the one thing that we do have to realize is that we do have rights, and we do have to realize how we affect others by how we use our rights as well.
Yes, and that's what basically common law gives everybody the right.
Yeah.
Don't get into somebody else's business if you don't need to.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But again, that's one of the funny things about the NRS is it actually dictates where the local law enforcement can get involved and how they can get involved. And people need to start reading it. I mean, because I can't tell you how many times I've read it, I've shown people, and they won't believe it. It's there in black and white. And unlike the Bible, this is actually very specific. When you're reading the NRSs, it is extremely specific. There's no way to interpret it other than how you read it. Some leave it very open to imagination, but it's very specific in what it's saying.
Yeah. If you have any doubt about where it says federal corporation, you can go to 28 USC 3002. There's a U.S. code government site you can go to. That's where I go. I go to the government site to get all the codes. So people know I'm not lying to them.
Well, I mean, Gary started out right, and I wanted to recap on that. But you have to read the constitutions and the articles on how it's of the federal constitution and how it's set up. Basically, so I mean, because just because something's a law doesn't mean that it's constitutional and it can be enforced. You do have to look up Supreme Court rulings, and that's pretty much what I do every day, all day, is look up Supreme Court rulings and laws and federal codes.
And remember, any law that conflicts with the constitutional law is null and void. It don't exist, cannot be enforced. That's what the law says.
I get that question a lot. So when somebody says, "Well, my rights have been violated. What can I do?" The only thing you really can do is you can write to everybody. You can do everything that you want to do, but you can vote right. You have to put people in the voting offices that are actually going to try to understand you. So the issue that I have is like I ran for a law enforcement position, but everybody said that I didn't have experience. Well, the experience is what got you this far.
Well, you don't really need the police experience. You just got to have a good management.
So even when it comes to like a judge, when you're hiring a judge that goes or a justice of the peace, and they don't know what it's like to be poor, they don't know what it's like to be on welfare, they don't know what it's like. They have their own little echelon. They only hang out with a certain amount of people. How well do you think that they are going to understand you? If they have money and you've grown up with no money, you can understand why people do what they do, how things are happening. I dwell in the slums. There's a lot of things that are going on that makes me lose sleep at night.
I don't remember the guy's name, but there's a judge on YouTube.
Constanza, I think it is.
He wears glasses.
Yeah,
he makes some good decisions.
Yeah, he inspired me to actually want to run. But then I'm always thinking about where it can be utilized best.
So we got 3 county commissioners positions coming up. If anybody really understands about this corporation, we need some people to run that are still registered. And the first thing you do is unincorporate all these government agencies. Take them back.
Mm-hmm.
Take them back to the public. Do not let them go to these corporations. Bring them all back. And if you want to read this Treaty of Peace of 2020, you can go to www.hudok, it looks like hudok.info. hudok.info. Or you can just enter it in your search machine, Treaty of Peace 2020. And I made up 2 booklets on this thing, and I'm still reading it, but it's really interesting. How now we can take a lot of our court problems through arbitration.
Well, actually, the NRS actually talks about that, too. And then when I was talking about the excessive bails and fines, you can actually take a judgment of excessive bails and fines to another equal or higher a judge. So we have 2 justices of the peace here. So if one gives an excessive bail or fees or fines, you can take it to another judge to have it reversed, or you can take it to a judge or the other justice of the peace to have it reversed.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can get the ACLU to help me on a case. If not, I'm going to do it myself. But I'm going to go out to the medical doctor in Soledad Prison for human rights violations.
Yeah. Well, again, that all has to go to court. I mean, I've been reading a lot of how a lot of the things actually in Pahrump are going bad. Like, we had a deputy here who arrested himself and then sued the county and won for false arrest.
Yeah,
how does that happen? Well, he did it out of Washoe County.
That's a good way to make money.
Yeah, but see, the thing is that like when somebody
scam though.
Well, yeah, when somebody else gets like this, that's the next issue. So like when he does something wrong and he gets sued, the county has to pay for it.
Yeah, that's why they got those bonds policy, which are run by the Vicar General.
Well, that's the issue too. Is why we're running into a lot of problems. Is nobody can be held accountable because the state has to pay for everything. When they make a mistake, the state has to pay for it, or the county has to pay for it.
Well, actually, we found out that most bonds are held by the Catholic Church.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that like,
well, yeah, they got to pay for that bond.
I'm saying if I can sue you and get $270,000, you sue me, and then somebody else pays for it. Yeah.
Can we work a deal here?
Huh?
Can we work a deal?
No, we can't. Because it like in the state of Nevada, if you go to sue somebody and lose, you have to pay both lawyers' fees.
Maybe we'll get Frank in there too. Make it a 3-way.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if you sue somebody in the state of Nevada and lose, you have to pay both lawyer fees and restitution.
Let's just represent ourselves, and we'll be attorney of facts.
Yeah. So that's another thing too that I was actually looking up. That if you're actually summoned to court, you have to go. There's no other way to go around it. And if it gets dismissed, or if they don't have any proof, you are due restitution.
Well, a summons is an invitation.
No, because if you don't go, you're definitely going to come get you.
It's an invitation. Well, that's when it comes in. Well, they may come get you, but they have no jurisdiction to. Well, that's another thing. You got to decide when you're going to fight and when you're not going to fight.
Well, what I'm saying is that when you have to go to court and you're found not guilty, and they dismiss it, or they don't have enough evidence, you are due restitution. They are supposed to pay you for your time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that buddy of mine in Virginia is going to make some money.
Well, like that's the thing is like there's a couple guys spending like 6 to 7 days here when it's that 7. When I was reading in federal codes about the detaining somebody,
you got 30 seconds. You're going to make it fast.
They can be detained 72 hours as a recommendation. Anything after 72 hours, they have to be restituted. So if the people are sitting there for 6 months, they have to be restituted for 6 months. Or if they're found guilty, it just transfers over to their crime or their judgment.
Yeah, and people don't understand that International Bill of Rights and International Human Rights you need to study because you can use them in the courts here.
Yeah.
So this is KRJ, Gerry Bergman, your host, and Gerry Buttler is my guest co-host. And remember, I guess it's 12 o'clock Saturday at the 372 and 160 cross intersection there. Second Amendment rally. Go get yourself the proper flag. Don't be flying that military battle flag that's martial law. Go get the flag that stands for the Constitution. Over there at Communications Inc. or buy it on Amazon. They got T-shirts, hoodies, hats. You can go to Cafe Press and order items, or you can go right directly to www.uscivilflags.org and buy a bunch of good stuff. So we'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you for joining us, and we're gone. Bye.